September 9th, 2025, at 7:23 p.m., a 40-year-old Su-24M bomber is getting its final checks for a tough mission. The ground crew uses hydraulic jacks to inspect the jet, while two huge Storm Shadow missiles, each 1,300 kilograms, are secured to the plane's wings. These missiles carry powerful 450-kilogram warheads built to destroy bunkers and concrete headquarters. As the jet rolls toward the runway with its 2,600-kilogram load, the crew gets a green light on the final lock test and steps back with a quiet nod. The target is roughly 850 kilometers away from the 7th Tactical Aviation Brigade base in Donetsk Oblast. For the Su-24 pilot, this is the riskiest flight of his career. The 250-kilometer range of the Storm Shadow missiles seems safe on paper, but in reality, it's a dangerous setup. The pilot must launch these 450-kilogram explosive warheads from just 15 kilometers away to hit the target. The pilot had to fly into a zone packed with Russian air defenses and radar systems. Still, the Su-24 blasted off the runway like a dart, set for a 35-minute flight. One wrong move could spell disaster for the Ukrainian forces. At that moment, a massive Russian armored group from the 41st Army and 20th Corps was gearing up for a big push in Pikrok. Ukrainian pressure along the Pokrovsk-Doylila line had created a large pocket, putting two Russian regiments at risk of being completely surrounded. The 41st Army and 20th Division got the call for backup. Behind the front lines, dozens of T-90 tanks, BMP-3 armored vehicles, and self-propelled howitzers were lining up for a counterattack toward Pokrovsk, with fuel and ammo convoys waiting to roll. But this attack plan would fall apart before a single tank could move, thanks to a massive blunder by the Russian High Command, one of the worst mistakes in modern warfare. The day before, Ukraine's Hortitsia-M ground-based electronic warfare and signals intelligence system picked up unusual spikes in data traffic on key frequencies used by top Russian commanders. The Russian officers were operating in their usual safe routines without a second thought. They had no idea that their communications and data flows had already been captured, sorted, and analyzed. The signals all pointed to two locations: the Topaz Radio Electronic Factory in the north part of the city and the huge Donetsk metallurgical plant right in the center. Shark reconnaissance drones were quickly sent to the area and followed the trail from 15,000 feet up using high-powered optical zoom cameras. The extended hours-long watch by the Shark drones gave clear visual proof of vehicle movements and security details for high-ranking officers coming and going from the sites. The Shark drones confirmed that these two industrial spots were serving as the headquarters for the 41st Army and 20th Division. Ukrainian troops had also spotted the large mechanized tank convoys getting ready for an assault in that direction. The way to stop the huge Russian tank convoy wasn't to bomb it or meet it head-on at the front line. Ukrainian forces didn't have time to set up a counter-defense or an ambush. Instead, the plan was bolder and sharper. Take out the two command centers running the show with one precise strike. The Su-24's mission was the only shot at pulling it off. Donetsk and its surrounding areas were guarded by Russia's top-tier, multi-layered air defense systems, like the S-300 and S-400. The Storm Shadow missiles, cruising just under the speed of sound at Mach 0.8 to 0.95, were the key to hitting those targets. Launching from max range, a safer distance, would give Russian radars and fighter jets a clear 15-minute window to spot, track, and take out the slow, steady Storm Shadow missiles. That would doom the mission before it even started. The answer was a daring move, balancing on the edge of crazy and heroic, cut the missile's flight time to under a minute. The pilot would fire them just 15 kilometers from the target and then somehow escape alive, all on his own, with no escorts. His only defense would be his skill at flying low. The electronic countermeasure (ECM) systems, upgraded through NATO integration, and the chaotic explosion of action that would soon light up the skies over Donetsk. The Su-24 blasted off the runway like an arrow, vanishing into the night with its two 1,300-kilogram deadly payloads. Right after takeoff, the pilot shoved the stick forward, dropping the jet toward the ground. At just 50 to 60 meters, it skimmed between treetops, close enough to almost touch the cockpit window and power lines, using the terrain's blind spots to stay hidden. This was the Su-24's specialty. Its modern terrain-following radar, packed into its old frame and paired with digital maps, made it nearly invisible to Russian radar, like a ghost in the sky. But the pilot's success hinged on the flawless teamwork of a whole electronic warfare network. Dozens of drones and the command center in Kyiv were key to the mission's success. Coordinating support with drones used for deception and distraction was crucial. Different drones took off from hidden bases across Ukraine, moving like parts of a grand orchestra. At the same time, Ukraine's newly developed Peklo cruise missiles, powered by 3 jets, were launched. These weren't decoys. They were the shock troops, hitting the scene just seconds before the main strike. Their targets matched the Storm Shadow's objectives, 2 aimed at the 41st Army headquarters and 1 at the 20th Division headquarters. The Peklo missiles were sent to spark panic and chaos, hitting first to damage the command centers, pushing personnel into shelters, and, most critically, grabbing the Russians' full attention to give the Su-24 pilot those precious seconds. Alongside the Peklo missiles flew a swarm of 15 UJ-26 Beaver and RAM-2X kamikaze drones at medium altitude. Their job was straightforward: overwhelm the radar screens of the Pantsir and Tor batteries, flooding them with fake targets and tricking operators into making bad calls. 7 of the UJ-26 Beavers had a specific role. They targeted the power distribution cabinets and backup UPS rooms of the radar control centers in the area. The goal wasn't a total blackout, but a brief, targeted blind spot, causing data flow interruptions lasting just seconds, but critical to the mission's success. The whole intricate operation was being run in real time from an underground command center in Kyiv through a secure satellite link. On a massive screen, icons for the Su-24, kamikaze drones, and Peklo missiles moved forward, surrounded by menacing red circles showing Russian radar ranges. The kamikaze drones stood out with their odd altitude patterns and sudden direction shifts. Russian operators were swamped, grappling with dozens of targets, interference, and fake echoes, flooding their radar screens all at once. The first kamikaze package failed to lock on, and a 20-second glitch hit the system as the operator scrambled to switch frequency bands. The delay might have looked like a brief pause on Russian radar screens, but it was all part of the planned chaos. Meanwhile, 7 UJ-26 Beavers pressed on toward their targets, sneaking in at low altitude. Minutes later, 2 big wins came over the network. 2 kamikaze drones had hit their marks, taking out 2 separate radar stations and a command and control vehicle. This created a fleeting gap in the Russian defense network, a blind spot and communication breakdown lasting just over a minute. That was the window the Su-24 pilot needed. He pushed his jet full throttle through this blind corridor, but the danger was far from over. A Russian Berev, a 50AW ACS aircraft scanning from high altitude picked up the heat signature from the Su-24's engines despite the brief blind spot and sent the data to the nearest S-400 battery. A piercing radar lock warning blared in the pilot's headset. In a heartbeat, he yanked the stick back, sending the jet into a near vertical climb to sharply cut speed while slamming the chaff/flare button. A burst of metal particles and a magnesium heat cloud exploded from the jet's rear, successfully fooling the seeker head of the incoming 48 N-6E missile. The huge missile chasing the decoy exploded harmlessly in the sky. It was a split-second dance between life and death. As the pilot escaped and dove back to low altitude, the Peklo missiles were closing in on their targets. The 3 Peklos approached the city from different angles. One got spotted and shot down at 8 kilometers by a Tor battery. Another was taken out at 12 kilometers by a Pantsir, creating 2 fiery blasts in the sky. But the third, Peklo slipped through all defenses and slammed into the main communications tower on the roof of the Topaz factory, home to the 41st Army headquarters. The 50-kilogram warhead's explosion snapped the tower like a twig, cutting off the headquarters' main link to the outside world and sparking panic inside. Russian commanders and air defense operators were now fully focused on this sudden, unexpected strike. Alarm sirens wailed as everyone scrambled to figure out what was happening. This single strike threw the headquarters into disarray, breaking their orderly rhythm. This was the exact moment they'd been waiting for. The chaos, panic, and cut-off communications created the perfect cover for the Storm Shadow missiles. The pilot hit the launch point. Live footage from a Shark drone hovering above confirmed the targets were active, with high-ranking commanders inside the buildings. The final order from Kyiv came in one word: fire. The two Storm Shadow missiles smoothly released from the jet's wings, starting their deadly independent paths. As they glided toward their targets, the pilot banked hard, pushing the aircraft to its limits, and dropped back to skim the treetops, escaping the chaos he'd unleashed. 35 seconds later, the first Storm Shadow hit the 41st Army bunker under the Topaz factory. Guided by a Shark drone's laser, the missile plunged into the main ventilation shaft. Deep underground, dozens of meters below, it exploded right among the general and his staff. The massive blast, trapped in the bunker, had nowhere to go. The pressure wave ricocheted off the concrete walls, shredding everything, equipment, plans, and all into bits. 43 seconds later, the second Storm Shadow struck the 20th Division headquarters at the metallurgy factory. Its warhead performed like a perfectly timed symphony. The first explosive punched through multiple layers of reinforced concrete on the building's roof, carving a perfect path for the main warhead. Milliseconds later, the 450-kilogram warhead slid through that hole and detonated in the heart of the command center. The enormous pressure wave ripped through every floor from the inside out, with no way to escape. The building's steel frame held for a split second before buckling under its own weight, collapsing in a massive cloud of fire, smoke, and concrete dust, swallowing everything inside. The Russians initially tried to hide the panic and the extent of the disaster. Both sites were swiftly sealed off by military cordons of Spetsnaz and FSB units. All roads to the area were blocked. Debris clearance went on under floodlights through the night, shrouded in secrecy. The non-stop wail of ambulance and fire engine sirens, heavy machinery rumbling until dawn, and streets taped off with military barriers told the real story. The attack's impact was like paralyzing Russia's command structure. The 41st Army and 20th Division headquarters weren't just order-giving hubs. They were where intelligence from the entire front line was collected, analyzed, and used to direct artillery, air support, and logistics. When those centers were wiped out, the army lost its brain. Field troops couldn't reach their commanders. Phones went dead, encrypted networks crashed, and the army fell back to passing orders on paper, painfully slow and outdated for the 21st century. Plans that should have taken hours dragged into days. In modern warfare, artillery depends on quick sensor-to-strike timing. The headquarters processed target data from drones and forward observers, feeding it to artillery batteries. Without them, thousands of Russian field guns were left blind and deaf. The result was clear. After Ukraine's strikes on the two command centers, Russia's artillery either stopped firing or resorted to inaccurate random harassment fire. The massive mechanized offensive being planned needed huge amounts of fuel and ammo. The headquarters that controlled the flow and timing of these supplies were the ones hit. Without them, logistics convoys behind the front lines stayed stuck in their depots, waiting for orders that never came. Hundreds of tanks and armored vehicles turned into useless metal heaps, lacking fuel and ammunition. The destruction of these two industrial sites, seen as the untouchable heart of Donetsk, sent a shockwave through the Russian army and its allies. Even staff at headquarters far from the front no longer felt secure. This sparked deep distrust and paranoia among the command ranks. The remaining Russian command units started breaking into smaller, scattered groups, constantly shifting locations. While this made them harder to pinpoint, it permanently weakened their ability to coordinate and command effectively. Meetings at Russian command centers on the Ukrainian front became brief, decisions were delayed, and most critically, the question of who had targeted them triggered a witch hunt within their ranks. The FSB launched probes, suspecting a traitor or infiltration, which further crushed morale and stifled initiative among troops. The attack didn't just halt a Russian offensive, it handed Ukraine a prime chance to take control across Donbass. With the Russian front paralyzed and stuck in a command void, Ukraine launched its counter-offensive. As Russian artillery and air defense coordination crumbled, Ukrainian drones, artillery, and armored units gained much greater freedom on the battlefield. Areas once dangerous due to Russian counterfire turned into hunting grounds for Ukrainian artillery. Russian units, left without leadership, began leaving gaps in their defensive lines. Ukrainian special forces and small, mobile assault teams slipped through these gaps, hitting Russian rear lines, cutting off supply routes, and launching quick counterattacks. Progress that would have taken months was now happening in days. Thanks to the command vacuum, Ukraine wasn't just responding to Russia's moves anymore. It was setting the pace and choosing the battlegrounds. The static trench warfare in Donbass started shifting toward dynamic, maneuver-based combat in Ukraine's favor. This wasn't just a tale of destroyed buildings and fallen commanders. It showed how technology, intelligence, and grit could outmatch raw power. If you want to keep up with this war, not just the numbers, but the strategies, human stories, and in-depth analysis, be sure to subscribe to our channel, like this video, and share your thoughts in the comments below. War is won not only on the battlefield, but through knowledge and awareness. Thanks for watching.